Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. Today, we're doing a little bit of a news rundown. We've got some updates on all sorts of players from around the league. As you can tell from the title of today's show, we'll definitely be covering DeVonta Smith, Davante Adams, CeeDee Lamb, and more. We'll get some Rashee Rice stuff. We'll get some Daniel Jones stuff. We've got some CJ Stroud stuff to talk about. All sorts of news coming up on today's show. So go ahead, pull out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, good morning to everyone here in the chat. Big Country, Applied Literature, Jamie, Anthony. Glad to see you all this morning. What a wonderful morning we're having here on Wake and Take. Full disclosure, everyone, I don't know why. One of the mornings here, just one of those mornings for this fella, kind of just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I honestly don't know what it is. I'm just not kind of like woke up and not necessarily a pissy mood, but I just don't feel right. And nothing's kind of working, so having one of those mornings. But the show shall go on, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk some news. And we'll start with my favorite story. This is just my absolute favorite story. I love this. I was, as I do, just trying to find the news to talk about for our shows this morning. And the one of the stories on NFL.com was about Coleridge Bernard Stroud IV. And which, again, I just love that his name is Coleridge Bernard Stroud IV. But it was kind of on what happened when he kind of found out about the Stefon Diggs trade. And it's just silly. So I'm going to read this quote. He was asked, how did it feel when you found out Stefon Diggs was traded to your team? And this is what he said. I was asleep. I've been on the West Coast, back home in LA, so I was knocked out. I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb because I get a lot of phone calls. So I really didn't know. I woke up and my boy Chase texted me and he's like, how you feeling, bro? And I'm thinking like, I'm good, fam. How are you? And I had sent like 5 texts like that before I woke up for real. I was, halfway texting in bed. I woke up, brushed my teeth, washed my face. And then I saw the news. I saw it on Instagram and I was like, oh, shoot. That's what they're talking about. I just think that's hilarious. I just think that's so funny that CJ Stroud was just totally knocked out when Stefon Diggs was traded to the Texans. I feel like it was like mid-afternoon as well. And then he just kind of texts a bunch of his friends about it, or his friends are texting him, and he doesn't even really know that it's about the Stefon Diggs thing. I just think it's silly. I just think it's silly hearing about these wildly successful people still not, or just like kind of just being normal. The dude does the same thing we all do, right? Where we're just like half asleep in our bed, checking, whatever social media updates we got, whatever news stories, because we're flooded with notifications in the morning. And it's just cool. I just thought it was fun. I thought it was silly. He kind of went on to talk about some of the other wide receivers on the team, of course. And he talked about how Tank Dell is already back at the off-season program. So that is really, really good to hear that Tank Dell is already kind of back working with the team. And he also went on to talk about John Mechie a little bit as well. And this is what he said about John Mechie. I think last year was good to get his feet back in the water, coming off an injury, and then something so traumatic like being sick how he was. His mindset is that he's ready to come back and ball. Not only is he a great football player, but he's a great person, and I wouldn't want anybody else other than those guys in that room. Mechie is looking amazing. Everything that he'll put on this field will be no surprise, but I think everyone in this room knows how special he can be, and he'll put that on the field. As the resident John Mechie enthusiast, I just love hearing some John Mechie hype come from the mouth of his quarterback. Now, of course, a quarterback is never going to talk down on one of his teammates, but I do think that John Mechie is a wide receiver that will have a role in this offense. And of course, that kind of depends on how big that role is and everything. But we know that he's kind of taken this long road to get there, and being even the wide receiver 4 on this offense is probably going to be good for fantasy football, especially when we do have the health concerns with not only Tank Dell, but, Stefon Diggs is getting up there in age as well. So there is definitely some opportunity that John Mechie could become the wide receiver 3 by the end of the year on this team as well. And so just to hear that he's working really hard, that everybody can tell how special he's going to be, that's exactly what you want to hear. And I'm very excited to see kind of how that translates. I've been seeing a lot of talk just in general about John Mechie and if you should even be dropping him in our dynasty leagues. And I would say just hold on to him for now. I think we know for a fact now that the Texans are probably not going to add to that wide receiver room in the draft. If they do, that's when you can drop him. But I think this is probably how they're going in, right? The Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, John Mechie, Noah Brown. Like that's their wide receiver core, and there's probably not going to be much more change coming there. And with Mechie now going into technically year 2, then I think that's going to be a little bit better. I know he didn't see a lot of snaps last year, but last year was also, for all intents and purposes, his rookie season, and also just his first time coming back to football. But he was pretty good at Alabama, really, really good route runner. I think he could be solid for this team, especially with such a good quarterback like CJ Stroud. So if you're rostering John Mechie, just keep holding on until at least after the draft and see if they add someone else. But I think for now you could hold on and just see what happens. I think that could be solid. So that's my fun little CJ Stroud story. Dude was totally snoozing when Stephon Diggs became his new wide receiver. Which now leads us to the wide receiver discussion. DeVonta Smith earned an extension yesterday. And again, as the resident Slim Reaper enthusiast, I'm very excited about it. This is a 3-year contract worth up to $75 million, with $51 million of that guaranteed. This is the 4th highest average annual salary amongst wide receivers at $25 million a year, which is exactly as much as AJ Brown makes. They are both tied for 4th highest average annual salaries at $25 million a year. So the Eagles, of course, investing in their wide receiver room for good reason. The NFL is kind of going this way where everyone has to pay up for their wide receivers, but also with so many kind of contracts in limbo right now, which Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, even arguably, it makes sense to just go ahead and get ahead of that and extend your wide receiver, DeVonta Smith. One of the only Heisman-winning wide receivers in NFL history, and who has been wildly successful in his time in Philadelphia. I know we haven't seen a true ceiling, but we've seen just such an incredible floor in all 3 seasons in the league, literally including his rookie season. He's had at least 100 targets, at least 1,300 air yards, at least 5 touchdowns, played in at least 16 games, averaged at least 12 yards per reception, and has finished as a top 30 wide receiver in PPR all 3 seasons in the NFL, literally finishing as a technical wide receiver 1. If you're one of the top 32 wide receivers in the NFL, then you're one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And for him to do that all 3 years in the league, especially year 1 when Jalen Hurts hadn't truly broken out yet, it's just really, really incredible. And again, that's just, I'm such a big fan of DeVonta Smith. I know that all of his metrics aren't necessarily like, melt your face metrics, but he's still, top 20 in a number of things and still really, really good as a route runner, especially versus man, where he's 7th in points per target versus man. And you just kind of look around and it's just like top 20, top 30 and everything. And that's just, that's really good. Like you can't really scoff at that when he's still kind of putting himself at the top of the league, where any team in the NFL would love to have him as their wide receiver 1. So just kind of great that he's earned this money, and quietly too, right? Like that's kind of a huge thing that's kind of going understated here, is how quietly DeVonta Smith got this extension. Literally just last year, AJ Brown was kind of on the same team crying, kind of having this whole little tissy fit about, his money, being on the Eagles in general, not being fed enough. And DeVonta Smith has been nothing but a class act in his time in the NFL. I don't think we've heard one wrong thing about DeVonta Smith. I don't think we've heard him complain a single time. And here he is getting his bag. So maybe wide receivers, maybe just don't ask for it. Maybe just go put it on the field, be good in the locker room, be a good player. And maybe it'll just kind of come to you, because I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we heard anything about, DeVonta Smith's holding out, he wants his money. DeVonta Smith is, only putting in half effort right now because he doesn't think he's getting paid enough. Like, no. If anything, we've only been hearing, just kind of how happy DeVonta Smith is to be out there. So again, just one of my favorite wide receivers. Love that he's getting this money, and I think it's deserving. I know, again, this is a top 5 contract, but there's a lot that'll be coming, so this will probably settle in more of like a top 10 type contract and just be a nice one. Just be a nice little contract for the guy. And it's only 3 years too, which isn't that long. The last thing I wanted to add on this is that there is some potential here. I'm just saying potential. I think ultimately the Eagles do try to bring back A.J. Brown, but we already know that he kind of complained last year. And now we know also that they do have an out on A.J. Brown's contract at the end of the season. And if you pull up A.J. Brown's contract, I do believe that if they don't take that out, they would be under a ton of money. But let me double check. Yeah, it would be $15 million base salary in 25 and then a $30 million base salary in 2026 if they do not take that out. Now, they probably won't. I mean, they'll probably, stick with A.J. Brown, but it's just something to consider as, salary cap is pretty finite at the end of the day. And I think that they would probably be more tied to DeVonta Smith, given that they just now extended him. But I'm sure they'll figure out a way to bring back both. But just something to kind of think about is that the Eagles might, kind of look to replace A.J. Brown in some capacity, or this could be something that we talk about next year, right? Where A.J. Brown is on the trade block, maybe by the trade deadline or something. Just, again, something to kind of just keep our eye on, that these kinds of things just all of a sudden reach a boiling point and become like super hot topic, as CeeDee Lamb has become. As CeeDee Lamb now is sitting out for the Cowboys voluntary offseason workout program. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, guys, this is a whole ass nothing burger. I know that this is CeeDee Lamb holding out and that this is, he might not play. But this is kind of stuff that we hear every single offseason. And there is no way in hell the Cowboys go into next year without CeeDee Lamb on the roster. He will probably get his money, is basically what I'm saying. Is, yeah, he might hold out. But it's not going to matter because he will end up either getting his contract or he'll end up playing, and it'll be fine. I really highly doubt that CeeDee Lamb is not playing football next season for the Dallas Cowboys, or really, kind of throughout. Yeah, he's a franchise wide receiver. I need to point this way towards the picture frame. So I think that we don't really have to get that kind of worried about CeeDee Lamb. Now, I do want to go ahead and put myself on the record. It's totally reasonable what he's doing. CeeDee Lamb deserves the money. Right now, he's entering the 5th year on his rookie contract, so they took that 5th year option. So he's only scheduled to make about $18 million guaranteed next season, which puts him about the 20th highest annual salary amongst wide receivers, whereas Christian Kirk even makes more than him at $18 million a year. CeeDee Lamb is 17.9. I rounded up, but Christian Kirk actually gets that $18 million a year, more than CeeDee Lamb, which of course has to make CeeDee Lamb feel disgusting inside. So I totally get it. And I think he deserves to do this. And I think that the Cowboys know that too. And so I think that we'll have a contract. I know I don't have any insider information, but this is not, CeeDee Lamb is too high profile of a name for something to not happen, whether that he's just like, screw it, I'll just play on this $17.9 million, or the Cowboys are like, screw it, we'll, maybe even like worst case scenario is a 1 year contract worth like 20 base with a ton of incentives kind of put in. But even then, that's worst case. CeeDee Lamb's going to be a Cowboy for really forever. Let's be honest here. CeeDee Lamb's a Dallas Cowboy. They have him. They don't want him going anywhere, and they definitely need him to be on the football team next year. So I'm not gonna be really too worried about it. I could agree here. FF Bearded Prince, CD will be the highest paid wide receiver. I think that's true. And then Anthony asks a very interesting question about Justin Jefferson. Would you have the same kind of train of thought when it comes to the Justin Jefferson situation? And my answer is yes and no. I think what is playing more in CeeDee Lamb's favor is that this is a Super Bowl window for the Dallas Cowboys. They want to win the division. They want to win playoff games. They want to go to the Super Bowl. They need CeeDee Lamb to do that, whereas the Vikings are not necessarily that desperate. 2024, let's face it, is kind of a lost season for that team. Could they win some games? Could they make the playoffs? Yes, but they're certainly not looking towards the Super Bowl. And so I think Justin Jefferson has a few more things kind of working in his favor, where he actually has some leverage. We're sitting out, the team won't necessarily mind. Like, yes, it would suck, but they're not necessarily worried about the wins as much as the Cowboys are, to where I think CeeDee Lamb has more leverage in this situation, whereas I don't think Justin Jefferson does. Now, the Vikings certainly want Justin Jefferson to be a franchise wide receiver. And Justin Jefferson, doesn't necessarily want to stay in Minnesota, whereas I think CeeDee Lamb wants to stay in Dallas. I think Justin Jefferson wants to see that quarterback. And of course, we all know the Vikings are probably going to draft a quarterback, so it'll be okay. But I could see this definitely, I could see the Justin Jefferson situation being more serious than the CeeDee Lamb situation. However, I would still probably expect Justin Jefferson to be out there, week one. I think that if anything, he might just not go to the offseason camps. But I think that we'll probably be able to fully answer that question after the draft. I mean, I'm sure Justin Jefferson would want to work with a rookie quarterback and all of that. So I don't know. I think, but again, I guess I would just sum it up to saying I think that Justin Jefferson has a little bit more leverage / the Vikings have less urgency than the Cowboys do, to where I could see a scenario in which Justin Jefferson is not playing for the Vikings next season, is not playing week one, or like you can kind of conjure up a bunch of different things. So, but we also have less kind of information on that too. So it's just a little different. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I know that was kind of all over the place, but basically less urgency on the Viking side to make sure Justin Jefferson stays. Whereas I don't see that with the Cowboys. They need CeeDee Lamb. And it's kind of just, it benefits both sides kind of thing. Which brings us to the next wide receiver drama, Davante Adams. Davante Adams has come out and rejected the trade chatter. He says, if I wanted to be gone, I'd be gone by now. This is where I want to be. He went on to suggest that firing McDaniels and hiring Antonio Pierce improved the entire team, making him want to stick around. This is what he said. It's already helped the morale of the team. It's what we were all looking for, to be able to continue with the same mindset that we had. That's our guy. We've got to get to work now. And that's exactly what you want to hear. He does have 3 years left on his contract, but 2024 is the final year of guaranteed money, and they do have an out after this season for only $15 million dead cap. The reason I bring that up is because next year his base salary is $25 million, and the year after that is $44 million, and the year after that is another $44 million. Now, those are not guaranteed money, but it's still a lot of potential money that could go Davante Adams' way. And based on how the Raiders kind of go through 2024, I could see them wanting to move on from Davante Adams at his age, trading him away to a contending type team. But I still think that Davante Adams has a couple more seasons in him, and I still think that he should be someone to be buying right now in fantasy football. I think the quarterback play is going to be improved, and I think his usage is going to be improved as well. So I would be buying Davante Adams if I'm a competitor right now. I think he's going to be on the Raiders next year with a question mark on 2025 and potentially 2026. But for those years, I think you can kind of pencil in that it would be a contending team, which is, kind of exactly what you want to hear. So Davante Adams, he's being a Raider. I think we can kind of lock that in. I know that there were the trade rumors and all of that, but he likes Antonio Pierce. He's kind of older. He has guaranteed money on his contract. Like, it's just a messy situation to where it's going to be hard to trade for him. But they could move on or trade him away. But they could move on from him at the end of the season, which it looks like they'll probably do when you kind of look at those massive, massive cap numbers that could be going Davante Adams' way. So I would say a good dynasty buy, though, especially if you're contending, and a really good redraft value as well. I really, if it's Gardner Minshew, he's going to get targeted a ton. If it's a rookie quarterback, he's going to get targeted a ton. So, and he's still good. He's still good. We saw him still last year get open a ridiculous amount, and the ball just never really went his way. I don't think that's going to be the case here. I think Davante Adams is back into at least a wide receiver 2 next year. So anyway, that's D Adams, which brings us to the next wide receiver drama. Just real quick, we have a couple Rashee Rice updates, and one of them is actually football related. So that's very exciting news. Basically, we have all of this stuff coming out within the last week where he has the 8 charges that he's facing. He had the warrant out for his arrest. He actually surrendered himself to the police. Just a couple days ago, a couple of the victims sued him for $1 million in damages. And so it's kind of just getting messier and messier and messier. And I do also want to say that he is facing 8 charges right now. He could be facing more charges, as he has not been charged with leaving the scene of the crime yet. He has not been charged with his hit and run, which was kind of the big thing already. So he's currently already facing 8 felonies, could face more felonies, just got sued for $1 million by some people, and has also surrendered to authorities. That's not great. That's not great. But Andy Reid speaks. Andy Reid has come out and said, I'm leaving this like we've done for most of these, with law enforcement, or I'm going to restart the quote. I'm leaving that like we've done most of these for the law enforcement part to take place. And then we will go from there with that. Terrible sentence. Andy Reid did not phrase that well, but basically what he's saying is that he's going to let the police do their job before jumping to any conclusions in Rashee Rice's roster spot. And that's basically exactly what we want to hear. In fact, he also went out to say that Rashee Rice will be working remotely with the team for phase 1 of off-season training, which is just kind of virtual meetings. He'll do some strength and conditioning that I guess they'll kind of be checking in on, and also just some physical rehab. So no true team workouts anyway, but to hear that he's still going to be virtually present, at least and within the team's kind of plans for 2024 is exactly what you want to hear. I think that this kind of confirms at this point in time that he will not be released by the Chiefs. I know that was a worry by a lot of people given what they did with Kareem Hunt, but Kareem Hunt was a lot more replaceable, even if he was good, than Rashee Rice is. He was really the only bright spot in the receiving room last year. They need receivers, so they hope, nothing bad happens to him. Now, he might get a suspension or something, but I think he's basically locked himself in on the Kansas City Chiefs with this news. I think if Andy Reid would have done something, he would have just done it without law enforcement, kind of knowing his character and everything. I think the fact that he's letting this play out kind of speaks volumes to how he's going to handle this situation, because Rashee Rice is important to the team, and I think Andy Reid can kind of tell he's a reasonable man. I'm sure he knows that this is a very messy situation that does reflect negatively on character. And so if that was a big concern for him, he would have already released him. So I think that it's fine in terms of him being on the Kansas City Chiefs. Now we kind of just have to sit back and wait for the NFL's handling of this situation, which could be bad. I'm still going to say that it could be bad. I'm a little worried if he faces jail time and stuff like that. Like, it is looking like he's getting the book thrown at him right now, which is, of course, never what you want to see. But we do also know that in our judicial system, celebrities and people with money in general do generally get off easy with these sorts of things. So we'll see. We'll let it play out. Currently, I'm still saying I am not buying Rashee Rice unless it is like a late second. I'm going to stay away. I'm buying. I don't know. I feel a little uncomfortable with it, and I would still sell him for a late first for sure. If you can get a first for him, I'm doing it. Maybe an early second if you get another fun coupon thrown in there. But I don't know. This is a little messier than some of the things we've seen before where the NFL did nothing. I think he'll definitely have a suspension at least, and could also end up going to jail, which is, another suspension in and of itself. So anyway, that's the situation. One good thing to note is that Michael Vick, for example, went to jail, went to prison, served his time, came out, and then, had a comeback player of the year, was still really good for fantasy football for at least one more season. Rashee Rice is even younger than Michael Vick at a much, less important position in terms of, he should be able to still start again, whereas Michael Vick kind of had to go through the whole backup journey. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case with Rashee Rice. He'll just kind of serve his time, and then he'll play again, which will be fine. So anyway, that's kind of the way I'm looking at this for sure right now. Which brings us to, I believe, I've got a couple more things of note. First, we'll talk about Daniel Jones. He is expected to be ready for training camp. And I think that's good news. It's very hard to talk about Daniel Jones right now. I'm not going to lie. It is probably one of the more interesting players in the NFL kind of stratosphere right now, because we, don't know what the Giants are doing. There's a lot of smoke out there that they might actually be looking at quarterback. And we also know that Daniel Jones kind of had a down year last season after having a pretty solid 2022 campaign, earning that massive contract. Currently, I'm in the camp that the Giants will not be drafting a quarterback. I think that they will either draft a wide receiver or offensive lineman with their pick, leading them to at least throw Daniel Jones out there for one more season. I think their investment in Drew Lock, and not that it was a lot, is kind of what speaks to me with that. I think that Drew Lock is a solid backup for them if things go wrong with Daniel Jones, especially if they do add a couple more pieces. Now, they might take a chance on a quarterback later, but I don't think they're actually in these Jaden Daniels, Drake May sweepstakes really at all. And I don't really think that they're interested in Bo Nix or Michael Penix either. I think that they kind of screwed themselves with the contract to where they have to give him one more chance. And then if he sucks, then they know that they can go to the quarterback well in 2025. But I think for now, I really do believe that Daniel Jones will be the starter next season. So I guess technically I'm a buy. I don't want to give a lot of value up for him, but I think in super flex leagues, he honestly might get you some points next year. I'm being honest with you. I mean, we're not too far removed. In 2022, he had 3,000 pass yards and 15 passing touchdowns. He had 700 rush yards with 7 rushing touchdowns and was 10th in points per game, averaging 18.4 points per game in 22. Of course, led the Giants to the playoffs, won a playoff game, earned that massive contract. Was really good in a number of metrics as well, finding himself in the top 20 in a bunch of accuracy metrics versus both man and zone, was really efficient on the ground as well in the air. So, I mean, we saw a pretty good season from him in 22. And in 2023, not only was he injured, he had the neck injury in week 5 that held him out for 3 weeks. And then when he came back, he had the season-ending ACL injury. But also, the Giants' offensive line was terrible. The weapons were terrible and couldn't stay healthy. Saquon Barkley could barely get anything going. I mean, it was just an awful year for the New York Giants. And I don't think all of the blame, and I don't even think half of the blame, should really go Daniel Jones' way. It almost just felt like a cursed season for the Giants. I know it sounds silly saying this out loud, but it just, I almost am just chalking it up as a lost season. I think 2024 will be the real year that we can evaluate Daniel Jones if he could be the starter going forward or not. But I think ultimately the contract that they gave him, Drew Lock as his backup, and the players that could be there at their draft pick this year suggests to me that they will try the path of giving Daniel Jones either a better offensive line and a better receiver, and then kind of just see what happens for 2025. That's kind of my train of thought right now. And you can get Daniel Jones for basically free. Like you could probably get him for like a 3rd pick right now. That's kind of where my head is at. And applied literature says it right. I mean, he deserves a shot with a decent offense. I mean, even that year, right, in 2022, when he was 10th in points per game, his best receiver was like Wan'Dale Robinson and Richie James, right? So, I mean, like, I think, if they do get, like, Rome Odunze at their pick or Malik Neighbors at their pick, and then maybe an offensive line early in the 2nd round, or maybe the other way around. Like, maybe they get Joe Walt, and then they go and, get a wide receiver in the 2nd round. I think that that's a really good move as well. But ultimately, I think that it would be a disservice to not only Daniel Jones, but also themselves if they got a quarterback this year. They gave Daniel Jones too much money. They just did. They screwed themselves with that decision. They need to commit to it if they want to be a proper franchise. And then after building the team around him and then it fails, that's where you could go ahead and say, all right, in 2025, we'll move on. But at least we have this team built around him. Whereas this way, right, if they draft a quarterback this year, then they have a weird quarterback competition with no weapons and no offensive line. And whatever quarterback is out there is just going to fail again. Right? Am I wrong? No, I'm not. So anyway, I think Daniel Jones is going to be the starter next year. So I think Jamie, you said you couldn't even get a 3rd in a super flex league. No one would even give a 3rd for him. I think you hold. And you laugh at everyone when he scores you 20 points in week 1, right? I think that it's going to be fine, guys. I really do. Could he get replaced in 2025? Sure, but I think he should at least score his fantasy points next year. I really, really do. I really think that they may not be committed to him like in their head, but in their wallets they are, and they have to stay with that. I think that it would literally set this team back if they move on from him this year. It was a lost season. He had multiple injuries. The team sucked in general. I think if you could get, I might just go try to get him a 3rd. 301 to 304 got declined. Those guys have the first 3-4 picks in a round for a reason, right? Right? Like they have the top 4 picks for a reason, right? They're scared to trade. I don't know, Jalen Polk for Daniel Jones. Come on. Seriously. Come on, go buy Daniel Jones, I guess. I mean, seriously. Come on, guys. Which brings me, as we talk about injuries, as we talk about safety of players and the lost season Daniel Jones just had, which brings me to the final topic of today's show. The NFL had a player safety summit very quietly this year at the same time that the owners, general managers, and coaches gathered for the league's spring meeting. for the rules meeting, essentially, where they do all the new rules. 18 miles away at a resort, doing the same thing. 400 athletic trainers, equipment managers, strength and conditioning coaches, nutrition experts, sports science directors. All of these people had their own separate meeting to learn from each other, the league's research partners, to talk about player safety, to figure out the best way to go forward. This was the first time, which blew my mind, the first time that the NFL has had this event. And they plan now to make it a yearly event. So they should have had this, the first year of the NFL's existence, but they didn't. It's good to hear that they have it now. The NFL Player Safety Summit is upon us. So we might see this league get safer for our players. Hopefully we begin to see less injuries. I don't think this year's meeting will lead to anything, but the fact that it led to more years of this becoming an annual event is the good thing. But I doubt any true research came from this event. This was probably more of a handshaking inaugural type of thing. We've all been there. It'll kind of build from there. But just to hear that they're finally investing in a player safety summit where all these experts, 400 experts, can come together every single year to kind of discuss some safety concerns and ways to address them. I think that's a brilliant idea. So I'm glad that it sucks that they took so long to do it, but I'm glad that they're here now, and I'm excited to see what comes from it. Except, hopefully, this doesn't lead to flag football. We still need tackling in our game, I think. Maybe flag football could be fun, but probably not. It'd be good for fantasy. It would be good for fantasy. But yeah, that's it. I did actually just realize I had one more thing in my notes. Just one quick thing. I was looking through some mock drafts this morning, and Peter Schrager also has the Vikings taking Bo Nix at pick 23. So you heard it here first, and now Peter Schrager is doing it in his mock draft 1.0. So I like that call. I think that's a fun one. I think that's one to keep our eye on as well. So start stocking up those end of first, early second round picks, because I do think that the Michael Penixes and Bo Nixes will probably be some good values in our Superflex leagues. I think they will actually get picked in the first round. I just do. Which leads me to the final bit of today's show. Questions. Dynasty, which Dynasty old receiver would you rather roster? Adams, Kupp, or Diggs? And yeah, y'all know my take here. It's Cooper Kupp easily. Yes, because you said he's the cheapest, but also because he's the best. I really think that Cooper Kupp still, I would not be surprised. I know I've already said this, but I wouldn't be surprised if he outscored Puka Nacua next season. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a top 10 wide receiver again for redraft. I fully expect Cooper Kupp to be fine next year. He's had this off season to get healthy. And we saw the ceiling from him last year. He had 4 20-point games and only 12 games played. He was top 10 in red zone targets despite missing 5 games. I mean, it's just, he's going to score a ton of touchdowns. He's still going to get targeted a massive amount from Matthew Stafford. And the Rams offense is going to be even better next year. Last year, they kind of exceeded our expectations, proved that they were still good. This year, they have their first round draft pick in 7 years, right? So they're finally going to be able to make their team a little bit better. So I'm all in on this Rams offense, and I think Cooper Kupp, honestly, I think his value is disrespectful right now. To be completely honest with you, I just think it's disrespectful. So I'm buying Cooper Kupp wherever I can, and I'm buying Matthew Stafford wherever I can. And apparently, I'm also buying Daniel Jones wherever I can. What would I give for Davante Adams? I would say a late second. I'd probably throw a late second their way, and I don't know if a team would even take that. Because I imagine whoever has Davante Adams is already a competitor, so I think it's going to be hard to get him. But if he is on a team that's not competing, you could probably snag him for a second, or I don't want to say Jackson Smith and Jigba, but I wouldn't mind if you have, say, Jordan Addison. See, this is a good idea. Say you have Jordan Addison, sending that their way and seeing if you could get Adams plus a third for some fun or whatever, plus a second or whatever. If you have a younger wide receiver that I think has a lesser ceiling in terms of weekly point output, I think you could downgrade. I care about fantasy points. I don't know about you guys. So I'm putting quotes around downgrade to Davante Adams and get a nice cherry on top if you're competing. That's probably what I would do. 14-team Superflex, should I hold or trade JSN? Depends what you could get. I've been doing a little bit of both because he does still have this value of just being JSN. But I think since he is a value right now, I'm holding or buying. I've tried to trade him, and you could still get a decent amount if you're comfortable moving on, but I don't know about enough. I don't know if it's enough for what the ceiling could still truly be. And we kind of already knew, right? we kind of already knew his rookie season wouldn't be good. We all talked about it. We were all like, well, the Seahawks rarely use 3 wide receiver sets, so he's probably not going to see the field a lot. Geno Smith's not that great of a quarterback, and they're pretty committed to the run game. Well, we have a new offense coming in. In fact, the offensive coordinator is coming from the Pac-12, one of the more pass-heavy offenses in the college football last year. So I think that they're probably going to see more 3 wide receiver sets. Tyler Lockett's only getting older, so I think Jackson Smith-Njigba has an opportunity to be successful next year, and I would be buying him. He was still the first wide receiver drafted last year for a reason. He's still a stud in many of our eyes for a reason. So I would say buy JSN and only sell if you can still get, like, if you can still get a first for him, I guess do it. But I don't, if that's only if you want to pivot. And that's why I'm saying, like, I guess, because I think I would be committed to JSN and just see what could happen. I made a trade. Actually, I made a trade, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about it, to be completely honest, but I thought it would be fun. I have a team that is not very good, but it has Amon-Ra St. Brown. And last year I tried my best. I was an orphan. I took over. Last year I tried my best, holding on to Amon-Ra St. Brown, saying he was my cornerstone, saying I was going to build around him. And I didn't even, it was bad. It was not a good team. Just not a good team. I think I finished 7th or 8th. So like right on the bubble. I almost made the playoffs, but just not good enough. Stuck in mediocre land. That's just not what you want to do. So I made the conscious decision to trade Amon-Ra St. Brown to kind of fill out my roster. I traded Amon-Ra St. Brown for Justin Fields, Jackson Smith-Njigba, the 112, the 201, the 312, the 401, and then I also threw them my 2nd round pick, which was like the 206. So I guess you could kind of cancel out, I guess, those 3rd and 4ths and the 206 or whatever. But still, I don't think I won that trade as things stand, but I did feel good in my gamble, if you will, on Jackson Smith-Njigba, on Justin Fields. It's a super flex it's actually 2 quarterback league, so quarterback even more important. So I just thought taking that chance, as well as just still getting a potential. I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba's best comparable is Amon-Ra, right? So if that ceiling does hit, then I'm feeling really, really good about it. So I think if anything, Jackson Smith-Njigba's a buy, but I do also know that there is a market out there where you can still sell him. So it's really just, it's going to come down to the league ultimately. And yeah. So that's that. That should be everything. Looks like. Oh no, actually, one more trade question. This just went down in a Superflex league, the 102 and 202 for the 101, 301, and Hyatt. So what's this? Caleb Williams for Marvin Harrison Jr., Lad McConkey. Yeah, I don't know. I think the 101 side comes out on top, to be honest. To be completely honest with you guys. I'm curious. I'm just going to put this thought out there. I really think there's a world. I really think there's a world where Marvin Harrison Jr. becomes the 104 in Superflex drafts, 105 in Superflex drafts. I know that this sounds crazy, but that seems to be where the sentiment is heading. And if we get Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, all drafted before Marvin Harrison Jr. in the NFL draft, I don't see why that wouldn't happen in Superflex drafts either. Just saying. So it's a very interesting thing going on. And especially with so many people saying that they would take Malik Neighbors over Marvin Harrison Jr., I think that this is something slipping for sure. So anyway, I would say that getting Caleb Williams right now for essentially the one, well, I guess that you can't really do that. I think in terms of math, getting the 102 and 202 is better, but knowing that the 101 is Caleb Williams, I think that that's just better. And then I like the 301, so I think that that's good. So yeah. Yeah, and there we go. Matt Waldman as Odunze and Neighbors over Marvin Harrison Jr. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. It's just gone too far. It's just gone too far. Stop fading Marvin Harrison Jr. God, what is this? Gee, oh God. All right. Frustrating. I can't believe, like, I have to be high on Marvin Harrison Jr. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is another great episode of Wake and Take. I do want to stress, if you're not able to catch these live shows on YouTube, I keep getting people ask about, when is Wake and Take going to have a podcast? Wake and Take has a podcast. It's had a podcast for almost 200 episodes now. Since last year, it's had a podcast. So it's not on the main player profiler feed, but Wake and Take does have its own podcast feed. The link is in the YouTube description of every Wake and Take show, so go check that out if you have missed it. Please start tuning into the podcast if you can't make it to the YouTube show. And of course, you know, we prefer you to come over here on YouTube. I think that that's a little bit more monetized, but we get it. We get it. And I just want you to know that this show is available wherever you listen to podcasts. So go check that out as well. But as always, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell so you get notified when Player Profiler goes live. And you guys have a terrific Tuesday and a wonderful rest of your week. Peace.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.